My name is Clara Hayes. I'm 32 years old, and I'm a senior financial analyst. The air in my mother's sunroom was thick with the scent of lilies and unspoken judgment, a familiar cocktail for family gatherings. We were ostensibly celebrating my cousin's promotion, but the conversation had, predictably, veered to my own career trajectory. My mother, Eleanor, leaned forward, her eyes narrowed, a small, tarnished silver locket I'd worn since childhood clutched in my hand under the table. "Honestly, Clara," she said, her voice dropping just enough to ensure only I could hear the full sting, "you're truly worthless if you can't even secure a stable, meaningful position by now. All that talent, wasted." The word worthless hung in the air, a physical weight. I felt a familiar hot flush creep up my neck, but I forced my gaze to remain steady, a small, defiant flicker in my eyes. What she didn't know, what no one in that room knew, was that an email had landed in my inbox just an hour before, a formal offer from Morgan Stanley, explicitly stating they wanted me to lead a new data analytics initiative. The word worthless felt like a flimsy shield against the weight of that truth. To understand why her words still had the power to sting, even with such a monumental counter-argument waiting in my pocket, you need to know Eleanor. My mother always believed in appearances. From the perfectly manicured lawn to the designer handbag, everything had to project an image of effortless success. Beneath that polished veneer, however, was a deep-seated anxiety about status and a constant need to control her environment, including her children. My older brother, David, fit neatly into her mold, pre-med, then a successful surgeon, married to a woman from a good family. I, on the other hand, was always a little off-script. My fascination with numbers and patterns started young. While David was dissecting frogs, I was meticulously tracking the rise and fall of my allowance, creating rudimentary spreadsheets from my pocket money. My grandmother, my mother's own mother, was the only one who truly encouraged this. She'd given me the silver locket when I was 8, a small, unassuming piece with a delicate floral etching. "This belonged to my grandmother, Clara," she'd said, her eyes warm. "It's not flashy, but it has a story. And stories, like people, have a quiet value that's often overlooked." My mother, Eleanor, had dismissed it as tacky and suggested I wear the gold chain she'd bought me instead. But I kept the locket, polishing it with a soft cloth until it gleamed, a secret treasure. It became a quiet rebellion, a symbol of value defined by something other than outward show. My interest in finance only seemed to solidify my status as the difficult child. While my peers were encouraged to pursue law or medicine, I wanted to understand market dynamics. In high school, when I started researching economics programs, Eleanor scoffed. "Finance? Clara, that's such a dry, masculine field. Why not something with more prestige? Or at least something where you can wear nicer clothes?" She envisioned me in a corner office, but only if that office came with a specific, approved title and a view that impressed her bridge club. My first internship at a regional investment firm, secured through sheer persistence, was met with a lukewarm, "Oh, that's nice, dear. Do they have good coffee?" The implication was always clear: it wasn't good enough. Even when I graduated with honors and landed an entry-level analyst position at a respected boutique firm in Chicago, the praise was always qualified. "Well, it's a start," she'd say, comparing my modest salary to David's residency stipend. "But you're so smart, Clara. You could be doing so much more. Why aren't you at one of the real Wall Street firms?" It was a constant drumbeat, eroding my confidence even as I excelled. My work involved intricate data modeling and predictive analytics, skills that were becoming increasingly valuable. I loved the challenge, the way numbers told a story, but her voice was always there, a whisper of inadequacy. The pressure intensified after a minor family financial issue a few years ago. My uncle, Eleanor's brother, had made a series of ill-advised investments, and Eleanor, ever the family matriarch, felt compelled to help. She'd asked me for advice, then promptly ignored it. I'd warned her about the speculative nature of his latest venture, even showing her a detailed risk assessment I'd prepared on my own time. "Clara, you're so negative," she'd waved her hand dismissively. "Your uncle knows what he's doing. You're just too cautious." When the investment predictably tanked, she blamed everyone but herself, even hinting that my bad energy had somehow contributed to the failure. That detail mattered later, making me realize her dismissals weren't about my advice, but about her need to maintain control and never admit fault. Last year, I finally got promo. TED to senior financial analyst. It was a significant step, recognizing my expertise and leadership on several key projects. I called Eleanor, genuinely excited. Her response, "Oh, that's wonderful, dear. Does that mean you'll finally be able to afford a decent apartment? And perhaps meet someone suitable?" There was no genuine pride, only a reframing of my achievement through the lens of her own expectations for my life. It was a familiar pattern, one I'd grown weary of. I started to understand that her criticisms weren't about my actual capabilities, but about her own unfulfilled ambitions and a profound fear that I wouldn't live up to the image she'd constructed for me. My worth, in her eyes, was entirely dependent on how I reflected on her. This recognition was a turning point. I started to actively seek out opportunities that aligned with my definition of success, not hers. I expanded my professional network, attending industry conferences, and connecting with leaders in data analytics. I found mentors who saw my potential and encouraged me to aim higher. One of them, a brilliant woman named Dr. Evelyn Reed, who headed a research division at a rival firm, became a sounding board. She'd often say, "Clara, your insights are gold. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Her words were a balm to the years of Eleanor's subtle undermining. Quietly, I started polishing that old silver locket again, not just with a cloth, but with a renewed sense of self-worth. It wasn't about the monetary value, it was about the intrinsic worth, the story, the resilience. About 6 months ago, I started discreetly applying for positions at top-tier investment banks. I wasn't just looking for a bigger name, I was looking for a role that would challenge me, where my skills in predictive modeling and algorithmic trading could truly make an impact. The application process was rigorous, involving multiple rounds of interviews, technical assessments, and presentations. Each step felt like a victory against the narrative my mother had built around me. I pored over market data, refined my coding skills, and practiced articulating complex financial concepts with clarity and confidence. The more I prepared, the more I felt a quiet strength building within me, a resilience that Eleanor's words could no longer penetrate. Then came the call for the final interview at Morgan Stanley, for a lead position in their new quantitative analytics division. It was the kind of role that people spent their entire careers striving for, a chance to be at the forefront of financial innovation. The interview itself was grueling, a full day of back-to-back meetings with department heads and senior executives. I left feeling exhilarated, but also utterly drained. A week later, I received an email asking for a follow-up call. That's when the offer came, a comprehensive package, a substantial increase in salary, and the opportunity to build a team from the ground up. The email, sent just an hour before I arrived at my mother's sunroom, was concrete proof. "We believe your unique blend of analytical rigor and innovative thinking makes you an ideal candidate to lead this initiative," the email read, almost word for word. So, when Eleanor delivered her customary insult, her voice dripping with judgment, the word "worthless" hit differently. It didn't shatter me, it merely bounced off a newly reinforced shield. I took a slow breath, the silver locket warm in my palm. "Actually, Mother," I said, my voice calm and clear, cutting through the polite chatter that had resumed in the room. Everyone turned to look. "I just received a formal offer from Morgan Stanley. They want me to lead their new data analytics initiative." The sunroom went utterly silent. My cousin, whose promotion we were supposedly celebrating, dropped her teacup, thankfully onto a rug. Eleanor's face, usually composed, fractured into a mask of disbelief, then a flicker of something almost like fear. Her carefully constructed world, where I was always slightly less, always needing her guidance, had just imploded. "Morgan Stanley," she finally managed, her voice a reedy whisper. "But, that's a real firm, Clara. Are you sure?" She looked at me as if I'd suddenly started speaking in tongues. "Yes, Mother. I'm quite sure," I replied, pulling my phone from my pocket and showing her the email, the Morgan Stanley logo unmistakable at the top. "They want me to start in 6 weeks." Her eyes scanned the screen, searching for a flaw, a typo, anything to discredit it. When she found none, a strange smile, thin and forced, stretched across her lips. "Well, darling, that's unexpected. I always knew you had it in you, with a little push, of course." She tried to take credit, to reclaim control of the narrative, but her voice lacked its usual conviction. "No, Mother," I said, looking her directly in the eye. "This wasn't your push. This was my work. And to be clear, your words today, calling me worthless, are exactly why I've decided to accept this offer and create some distance." I didn't shout, I didn't gloat. I simply stated a fact, a boundary. The air in the sunroom, once thick with lilies and judgment, now felt thin, almost brittle. My brother, David, who had always stayed out of our conflicts, cleared his throat and offered a tentative, "Congratulations, Clara. That's incredible." Over the next few weeks, the fallout was exactly as I expected. Eleanor called, alternating between attempts to take credit for my sudden ambition and thinly veiled accusations that I was abandoning the family. I kept my responses brief and firm. I didn't need her validation anymore. I gave notice at my old firm, packed my apartment, and made arrangements to move to New York. The locket, which had been a quiet reminder of my grandmother's love and my own inner strength, now felt like a badge. I polished it one last time before I left, its silver gleam reflecting the new, clear path ahead. My mother's words had once been a cage. Now, they were just a faded echo, powerless against the roar of a life I was finally building for myself.